So I love just the title of the book, A World of Pain, A Hunger for Love. So I want to start with the first part of that chapter title and say, look at pain. What about the world pains you right now? Where do you see pain in the world?
Isolation.
Isolation is a pain, isn't it?
Mm.
Absolutely. What else?
A lot of the people who attacked the Capitol looked like they were in pain.
They did. And they wouldn't have recognized it as that as much, but I think it was epitomized for me by that one guy who kind of stood he was yelling right up at the camera saying, "You made us this way."
Mm.
And that's a statement of pain. You did this to me. And whether I agree about whether I did it, he felt the pain of my actions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the pain of losing people that we love, either to just plain sickness or COVID.
Yeah, yeah. And how many today know someone who is infected with COVID? Right, Harvey was just telling us that his hairdresser is has COVID right now, and it used to be that it was more distant, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Somebody else's friends got COVID.
Yes. Yes.
That's not true now, is it? So, what else? What other pain is there for you?
I have a good friend in Spokane whose husband has bought into the right-wing talk shows and radio, and she's just really suffering with that. I just feel such grief for her. It's like having somebody in a cult, you know, you just can't reach in.
And the hard part, Sharon, I don't know about for you, but for me, there's several hard parts where one of it is that I see the pain that they're going through. I feel their anguish at whatever they think is wrong. I also feel the pain of what I feel they've done to me, you know. But maybe the hardest for me is the pain of not being able to communicate across that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That distance that's been caused there is just really difficult for me. What other pain?
I think there's a pain of, I want to call it consumption, but it's also in terms of hunger, not physical hunger, but we consume and yet we're often unsatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Being a consumer, being involved in the material things.
Yeah.
And yet it doesn't fill that hole in our heart. Doesn't fill it.
The I have to have, and whatever you put on that list of have to haves, right? And you're right that it's a pain that can't be quite filled.
I like to always use the term or the thought, is it a want or a need? And do you know the difference?
And the reality is we don't really, do we? I can sometimes tell when yours is a want or a need. When you got it wrong.
It's the flashing neon lights are usually a warning. Yeah.
How about the rest of you? Where do you see or feel pain in the world today?
I
think the word that comes to me is poverty, just poverty of spirit, poverty of hope with some people. I guess poverty is just an encompassing poverty.
Yeah, thank you. Poverty is a huge thing, and you're right. It's a huge word that can take in a whole bunch of different aspects, can't it? Yeah. Anybody?
Because I can't see, is there any chance I could hear who all are present?
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Judy is here. Well, Judy and Judith
Judy
are.
West, Judy Robinson, both?
Yes.
Good. I got them.
Harvey's here.
Sharon.
Yep. Catherine's here.
Oh,
Jim's
Catherine,
here. Sharon and Greg are here. And Jim's almost here, kind of.
There were 6 when I signed in, and I thought somebody came after me.
Diane's been trying to come in, but has not quite been able to connect for whatever reason.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So she's trying.
I don't often think of it this way, but President Trump is obviously in pain.
Amen.
Really?
Yeah. And I look at many of my friends, some of them who are really hurting right now, but see it as anger rather than as pain. But there's a lot of pain that's there. And this kind of gets me to the question I was going to be asking anyway, because I can see very easily how you cause me pain. But where is it that you're the source of pain for someone else? Even if you're not trying to be, right? I'm acutely aware of how my actions, even when I know that I'm doing what is right for me to do, is causing pain in someone else.
Yeah.
Especially in the political arenas right now.
Hmm.
And that's really difficult because I don't know how to stop doing what I think is important to do, even though I can see the pain it's causing. And I may think it's unwarranted pain, but sometimes that doesn't matter, does it? I look at like some of the work I'm doing in immigration issues. I think it's important work, and I think that I'm right in doing that work. But there are people who that work gives them enormous pain. Judy, you last week talked about your neighbor who I think had enormous pain. And you weren't causing that pain, but I sure think he felt like you were helping to make that happen.
Well, you know, I sat with that for a while, and I really meditated about Chris and I, and I started seeing, I don't agree with anything he's standing for.
Yeah.
But I was able to see why somewhat, because he's ex-military and this is his commander-in-chief.
Uh-huh.
This is someone that he has been told is his leader. And he's not, and I'm not saying this is true of everyone who believes these things, but he's not real educated about history and stuff. But anyway, so I kind of I wanted to understand his pain and where he's coming from. But he and I have talked since, and we've just agreed not to talk politics because our friendship is more important than the politics.
Yeah. 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 And trying to figure out how to do that is challenging, because you don't want him to have to put away something essential any more than you want to have to put away something essential. And sometimes that's what that agree to disagree, or at least agree not to talk about what we disagree, sometimes asks us to do.
Well, we all have dogs in the dog park, and several of us, and all of us are ardent Democrats.
Uh-huh.
And Chris is the only Trump supporter and stuff. So it's like we all just decided we're just not going to talk politics because it's not going to go well. You know, so it's just prioritizing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, that whether or not you're right, you are contributing to his pain,
Yeah.
right?
There was a column in the paper yesterday on Martin Luther King Day. It was about Martin Luther King, and they were talking about how he recognized that in a democracy, you know, you have to recognize that you're going to be living with the people that you defeat, and that word defeat, you know. And I just thought that there was so much wisdom in that statement. Just that I do tend to think in these ways of who's going to win and who's going to lose this battle, you know, between the two ways of thinking. And reality is that's not going to work, because that's just going to sow bitterness and you know, hurt. I mean, the
But
question is, how do you do that?
yeah, but wouldn't it always be nice that when you defeat someone, you can exile them, you know, you can exile Napoleon to Elba, right? And not have to think about your enemy any longer. And that's simpler. That's why we've done that type of thing so often. But it's not our way of life. I think about, like,
I think it's something Rabbi Lerner talks about in his book when it's like people need a community and a
Mhm.
sense of higher meaning.
mhm.
And I think that's something that when you have media that is giving you different facts,
Yeah,
quote unquote, whatever, it's like it fractures a sense of community.
Yeah.
And then I think he's right in that we don't, you know, it's like there's the great deprivation. I think that's because I feel also that Chris feels like he's a working white guy who's like being trod over by the elite, or what he's, you know, it's like he feels like he's a victim.
Mhm.
And he feels like Trump is also a victim. So he's one of him. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's that whole thing of, and I think that's why it's so important that when those of us who go to the dog park with me with my little Ginger and they're with their big dogs, that we have a sense of community, that's more important than like saying, well, you can't come in here because I don't like your beliefs or something. You know, it's like we just really, we all live together.
Yeah. As acutely aware, Judy, this year of how much time we have between election and inauguration. And I think I understand much of why we do that, but in many places, as soon as the election is over, the outgoing person is gone. Because obviously it would have been simpler if, you know, as soon as it was decided, we start the transfer, right?
And I don't understand why we do it. I really don't, because it's like you have a lame duck president. I mean, our senators went in almost immediately who were elected. I know Mark
Yeah.
Kelly went in almost immediately.
Well, but that was a special case. He went
But he
in
was
because
position.
he was
That was a
finishing up a
special
term.
election. Yeah, I know.
Everyone else waited until after the first of the year. But I think some of it goes back to what Greg was talking about, that we want to say, you're not a part of this society, right? We're not writing you out of society because you got unelected, because your guy didn't get elected. That in some ways it's saying you're still part of this. And in a very real way with our president, for example, he has very real powers. He may be a lame duck, but the pardoning that he's either done or likely to do today is huge. There's a lot that happens there. And so it's kind of saying, yep, you're not the one who will be the president for the next 4 years, but you are still part of who we are. And that's not necessarily a bad message to think about. not that I want to listen to him, but the fact that we say that he still has a voice in our society is not a bad thing. And that's true of whoever that other person is. Do we have a value in our society on hearing each other's voice, even if we don't like it? It's hard, isn't it? Because that I don't like it makes me not want to hear it, and vice versa. And yet love draws us towards. I think what we've done too often in things is we've set ourselves up in opposition to each other. I'm amazed at some of the issues that we are on opposite sides of. And I don't know why. I don't know why it is that education has become such a polarized issue. Because my take is that my Republican friends, as well as my Democratic friends, and even those radical independent people, they all want their kids to be educated well. Right? I mean, do you know somebody who doesn't want kids to be educated well?
Well, it cuts two ways, because Judy was talking about the great deprivation. And education, on the one hand, prepares us for life, but there has been a stripping away too often of people who get educated of any sense of meaning and purpose. You know, there can be kind of a nihilistic edge sometimes, and I think that's what makes some people averse to higher education and intellectual elites, you know.
And I'm not talking about the how to educate or how to do some of the other things we do. It's what we do that puts us in opposition. You know, how many want to have free and free elections, right? Good elections, honest elections. I think my Republican friends want that as well. But the stories we tell that suddenly put us in opposition around electioneering because it benefits me or hurts you is what I'm really talking about. How is it that we put ourselves against each other? There's a bunch of issues like that in America today, where we have to take sides. And taking sides makes it harder for us to love.
I mean, who would have thought masks would become a political issue?
Who would have thought, right? Our public health should be something that we're all in favor of. Right? And so we take issues and make them into divisive issues. I'm going to go to my clergy colleague here. And Harvey, you have a lot of experience working with couples who are on the difficult side of their marriage. And have you seen, like me, that sometimes they come in with their reasons already outlined? They're just looking for permission to get apart from each other.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I feel like in some ways that's where we're at, is we're busy saying this is what divides us rather than this is what unites us.
Well, but I think that with the poor white people, and you see a lot of these folks in court and in various places where times are hard, these people have a feeling that they've been shut out, that society has already ruled against them. And so you get people who are entering the Congress halls and just going wild in there, because
Mhm.
this is a way that they can say, okay, now I've got a little bit of power to do something.
All right.
It's the time I don't.
And the reason why they feel that, I think, is for two different reasons. How many kind of think society has made a decision and they are on the wrong side of that decision? We voted against them. Now there's two different reasons. I may have voted against them because I wasn't listening to them in the first place, but they also may just be not listening to me in that the vote didn't go their way. And both of those attitudes are making it so that it's harder for us to get together. I might have been right in voting differently than what they did. But am I hearing in the midst of that why they didn't agree with my vote? Or am I furthering that sense of not being listened to? But if they're just saying, you're not listening to me and I'm not going to change my mind anyway, then why any longer should I listen to them? Why should I talk to them? Why should I continue to try to have conversation if they're not going to truly enter into that conversation?
I think this book, the rabbi talks about the whole idea. It's hard to hear what's going on underneath issues with people.
It is.
It's mind-boggling that they talk about Trump. He's one of us, and you think about who he is and what his life has been, and that makes no sense. But obviously, something in his message is resonating with them. And so to know them, it's like, I want to understand what is that there is resonating with them in that message. The intro, he talked about that the Republicans, the conservatives have really done a lot of work to educate conservatives on worldviews, like in colleges, like the conservative colleges, they put a lot of money in that, and how liberals put money toward issues but not towards teaching people about worldview. I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting because I really feel like I just don't get their worldview. I mean, part of me understands it, but
Right.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It's like we have to start understanding that, or there will be communication.
My cousin Bob, who I've told you about, if he has made over $40,000 a year in his lifetime, and he's roughly my age, if he's made over $40,000 a year, I would be very surprised. And yet he sees Donald Trump as speaking exactly his worldview. He understands.
Can you say what that is, what he means by that?
No. And so I'm baffled as you are, because it's too easy for him to get into this space of being confronted by my non-understanding of him. And it is difficult to get into the conversation. I have to ask myself, though, all the time, if it's my fault or his fault. Now, it's easy for me to blame him, but whether or not that's true, I can't do much about him. And so at one point in the book, the author says, we need to overcome the ways that liberal and progressive movements and the Democratic Party have alienated people who might otherwise have been on their side. And so I may not be meaning to alienate, but I have to be aware of where my actions are doing that. And I think it's easy for us to assume if we have a right answer, in my mind, a right answer, it's easy to think that my thinking is very self-evident. So why wouldn't everyone get this, right? It's easy to see, but there's several reasons why people may not get that. First of all, it's because of educational level. Okay, I've had the privilege of being able to go to a really good high school, to a college, to a seminary, and I've been able to learn quite a bit more than what Eager, Arizona is easily able to teach. That's Round Valley has been his center of being able to see something. Can I recognize that not to say that his education is necessarily wrong, but it is very different than mine, right?
Well, Jim, I've been realizing during this quarantine too, how dramatically lacking my education has been. And, you know, I'm with you. High school, college, I have a master's degree. And there is just way too much that I didn't know.
Right.
And
Right.
until this happened and some of the Black Lives Matter stuff came up, you know, it's behooved me to read more and to do more, but it's exhausting to try and catch up. I'm reading John Meacham's Soul of America, and it, you know, it catalogs all the well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the places where this sort of thing has happened before. The
Yeah.
Reconstruction piece and that kind of stuff, and how our history seems, well, maybe all of history, and certainly my own personal life, I think, goes in waves. You know, that there's prosperity, and then there's despair, and then there's, you know, rejuvenation, and then there's, you know, something falls apart. That there, if we could find a rhythm to it, we might be able to understand it better. But I've just been aghast at how much I didn't know, you know,
It's
having talked myself into being educated.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 3:30 now.
It's 3:30. Thank you. So if you have a bell, let's ring it. We'll ring it for about a minute. Can we do that? We won't go the whole 4 minutes.
Okay, I'm meant to be the only person here who doesn't know what the heck you're doing.
Sorry. That is,
I'm here too.
that is for 400,000 people in the United States who have passed away from COVID. And
Thank you. I
2
did not
million
know
around
what
the
you were
world.
doing.
And at 5:30, we're supposed to light candles for the same reason.
Wasn't this
Okay.
Joe Biden's part of
Yes.
the idea? Yeah.
Commemoration.
Yeah. And we should start doing things that remind us of that, because I saw a thing the other day, just by kind of a side note, that said that our life expectancy, because of COVID specifically, has lowered by 1 full year in the United
Yeah.
States.
Wow.
1 full year because of this. It's a massive thing, isn't it? So to get back to what we were talking about,
Jim, just one comment. That act of us doing that together really meant so much more to me than if I'd done it by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Exactly.
glad to do that with people.
Yeah,
So thank you.
thank you. And I think it fits into what we're trying to talk about here. It's the act of being together. Towards the end of the chapter, he begins to talk about the individual acts and the communal acts, and how you have to have both of those things. And it's easy for us to get caught up in the singular, only my stuff, or to get caught up in the, I'm just going to help and I'm not really going to do any of that internal work. And it really is, the spiritual life is really the two of those things. And the life of us in community is that, You know, I have to be the strongest person possible so that I move into that space together. And the hard part is exactly what you said, Judy. There's a lot of stuff that works against that. Some of it is just my inertia. I'm already settled, and making myself move to address this new issue is hard, right? And that's especially true when it comes to things like privilege and racism and prejudice. All of that stuff means that I have to look at something that is going to be challenging to me. Am I receiving something that it's better if I don't find out that that it's unfair, because then I'm going to have to decide if I do something to change myself, maybe lose something myself in order to equalize that problem. Racism benefits us, right?
Yeah.
Poverty and income inequality benefits those of us who are on the upper end of it, the privileged side of it. And so we don't look at it, or we don't let ourselves be affected by it. And that's especially true the further away it is, right? And I mean further by whatever things. It's harder for me to care sometimes about the Black man in Alabama, because Alabama is a long way from me, because I can disqualify Black or poor or whatever, right? And not have to look that direction. And I have to make choices around all of those things, as I do have to make choices around my Republican friend who's thinking very differently.
Well, I agree with Judy that I've worked very hard at educating myself more.
Yeah.
I mean, just as far as reading books, and I took classes on the Constitution online, because I thought, well, if I'm saying the Constitution is not, you know, I want to know what is in it. You know, it's like educate myself, what's there. And I've read and listened to this woman recently, and I sent you a link to it, Jim. I don't know if you
And I
were able to listen
started
to it.
watching it, but wasn't able to finish because of some things. So
That's okay. It's Dr. Bandy Lee, and she's a mental health professional. And she, along with 37 other mental health professionals in 2017 and late 2016 and 2017, wrote out a treatise about how unfit Donald Trump was mentally for this office.
Mm-hmm.
And they were shut down by New York Times and stuff. And now they're coming back to her, these people again, because of what's happening. But she's worked with people in prisons who are narcissistic murderers. You know, she works with these people in prisons. She has studied governments who become autocratic. She's done a lot of work, and I just got her book because I was really impressed with what she's saying. And one of the things she talks about is, for every time there is a dictator that comes about, there's usually one of the biggest factors is wealth inequality.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we've got someone who makes, I mean, how does someone have billions of dollars in their personal wealth? I mean, I can't even fathom. How do you, I mean, there's no way you could spend all that. Well, I guess there is, but not any way that you need that. And then you've got people in rural Mississippi who don't even have indoor plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
And literally their waste goes right out into the backyard behind their trailer.
Mhm.
And that, I don't really think that's sustainable, but I also have read there's a lot of people in this world and in this country who are coming together with this revolutionary love message. It's
Yeah.
not just Rabbi Lerner. There's a lot of people doing this. And so that I think that it's, if nothing else, Donald Trump woke up a lot of people, I think, to the fact that we need this message more than ever now.
Right.
If we are going to be sustainable. And it's like I listen to the Fetzer Institute and all these different places who they are putting forth the message of revolutionary love and everything he's outlining in this book.
Right. The difficulty is, you know, he goes into talking about the two different key points that we sometimes hold on to: the radical empiricism. Empiricism. Did I say that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Empiricism.
All right.
Yeah, as
And
long
then,
as it makes money for me, it's good.
yeah, yeah. Because I'm making money, that proves that I'm better. And so we take some kind of thing that says this. So where that took me is to my past profession as a school teacher, and how school teaching as a whole has gotten into the business of let's do test scores, and that will show that we're better or worse. And Judy, do test scores show everything that you do in educating a child?
No.
Nothing.
At the same time as that, Melissa was in the office, and every once in a while I'd hear her swearing. I shouldn't say that. I don't want you to think that Melissa swears, but she was doing statistical tables. And statistical tables, right, Harvey, make you swear. And there are all these things of saying, this is how the church is doing, right? And so it in many ways, it measures two things: participation and giving. And participation and giving are not bad ways of measuring something, but because if somebody gives $1 million check to something, it doesn't mean they're a really good person. They might just be trying to control something. They might be a really good person, right? Because someone is present in a service doesn't mean that they're being spiritually affected. They might be there because their mom made them. You know what I'm saying? But those are the things that are easy to measure, aren't they? Test scores are easy to measure. But what we sometimes have to deal with in these things is what can't be measured. And some of the things that he's talking about, love is harder to measure, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Kindness is harder to measure. And then you couple that to a second point, which is about the bottom line. And we like things like productive and efficient. And relationship is rarely efficient. Right?
Right.
Relationship does a lot of good things, but efficiency is not one of them. So how do we not get caught up in those very easy to measure norms and allow ourselves to expect something better out of each other? And especially that it comes down to how do we look at the human being we disagree with over here? And instead of seeing the very easy, I disagree with them, try to step into the human being relationship that is there. How do you do it? How do we step away from those easy empiricisms and efficiencies to move towards the messiness of life.
I think it's so easy to make generalities right now. I mean, I see a house with an American flag flying and I just assume something about those people. Unfortunately, that's the symbol now of the right. Things like that. And I listened to this Tara Brach, who's this Zen Buddhist person, and she had this interesting thought this last week. She said that it's about approaching people with kind of that beginner's mind, that open mind. And the question she said to approach someone new or anyone with is, you know, what's it like to be you? And I just thought that was such a cool question. You know, just that kind of openness.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I know at least part of what I heard in your conversation, Judy, with your neighbor was him calling out, maybe poorly, that he felt unheard. Right? And I see that in some of my conversations. And to be honest, I sometimes answer it by saying something that I'm sure sounds to them like, you're not heard because you're stupid. And I don't mean to say that, but I think that's what they hear in my response to them. And that doesn't help. Believe me, I know it doesn't help, but, right? And so how am I essentially feeding them in that space?
I also love listening to Tara Brach. I do a lot of meditation with her and stuff. And I love her messages. She absolutely nails it a lot of times. And one of the things she talked about too recently was pause. You know, and pause.
Oh, pause.
Take time, pause. That's like what makes music great is not so much the notes as the pause. You have to take some times to just, like, I know for me, the thing sometimes is just to spurt back something back at somebody, the first thing out of my head. And if I take the time to pause sometimes, it's like I have to think about stuff and go a little bit deeper than what just, and I think Facebook and stuff has led to some of that, where you just, everything's like short little memes. Instead of really thought-provoking conversation, it's just a meme.
Huh? Yeah.
Catherine talked earlier about wants and needs. And I've been persuaded over the years in my reading that every want is rooted in a need, but we often choose things to meet a need that not only won't meet it, but often have negative side effects. All addictions arise from this. But, and the reason why I'm talking about this is that when we look at people who are extremists, you know, we don't like what they're choosing, but perhaps if we, I don't know how to do it, but if we could find out what their real need is, we could have more compassion and acceptance of them, even though we don't like the choice they're making.
I think that's especially difficult too, Greg, when they're not even sure, because I think they've sometimes wrapped it up in something else. They wrap it up in Trump is just the best president ever, when in reality, what they're dealing with is, I don't like that I've never made more than $25,000 a year, right? And why isn't it that my rural area has more support so that our salaries can go up? Or, you know, and my cousin may not recognize that, but that underlies his love of something that is hateful to me. And that takes, go ahead.
Well, it gets complicated because I think about how people, some of us are more, what am I really trying to drive at here? I want to get to the meat of what I want to say, which is, sometimes people want to turn over their power to someone else to fix things. Sometimes people want to grasp it in their own hands. And I think probably either approach is somewhat doomed. Because we do live in the world, and because there is connection, and because the things that I do and think and say do have an impact on maybe not a whole lot of people, but if I say something negative to someone and then maybe they take it in and then they turn and say something negative to someone.
I think part of what I hear you saying, Catherine, part of what I hear you saying is that the easy answer isn't always the final answer. Okay, so as we look at the inauguration tomorrow, I'm glad for the answer we have, but I have to continually tell myself that that does not solve America's problems.
Mm-mm.
Not even close, does it?
Well, we could be deluded. Wow. We could become deluded in the same way we perceive that Trumpian people have been or are. That's a real interesting concept, isn't it? That we might be, we might be as delusional, and yet we would be really negative, and we would be really appalled to think that we might be labeled in such a way. But is that not a possibility?
Sure. I mean, think of it this way. How many felt like all that the Trump people seemed to care about was that they won the election, they beat, and so you had to listen to them? And if we return that favor and say, now we beat you, and so all of our stuff is right, have we truly done anything towards making revolutionary love? Right? If all we're doing is beating each other, revolutionary love is much more than that.
Well, I think the hardest part in my reading some of this is to realize it's not just what you or I think, and there being two diametrics, one, the Trumpian group and the rest of us, and then the rest of us. But the challenge is to think beyond that, to realize I haven't taken it far enough either. And I'm getting that, wow, there's something that could be beyond what I have envisioned, what I've been able to envision on my own.
Well, and let me do it one more step. It's not just something beyond what you could envision. It might be that some of what you envision is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I don't like looking at that.
That's why you got to clean the glasses off sometimes, you know, they get spotty.
Yeah, that some of their points might be valid points to listen to. But if we think some of our points are valid points for them to listen to, we have to be open to hearing the opposite, because it won't happen if it's just the one-sided.
Yeah, Mark Nichol has a story about a woman who was essentially spying on her neighbor and complaining that how could she hang up her laundry looking that shabby and dingy and dirty. And the crux of the story was that it was the woman's windows that were dirty, not the clothes on the other person's lines. And recently I've read, and it may have been on Facebook, I don't know, but some of this excess eating that I've been doing, it said my stomach is full, but my mouth is lonely.
That's right. I saw that one too.
And I think of that in terms of, you know, sometimes I'm not staying awake and conscious of what is it I'm doing here. You know, just munching away for no reason is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. But I think that you're right. Relationally, sometimes we're just munching along.
That's
Yep.
like his
I'm
talking
looking
about the
for
inner
Linda.
work, that he doesn't disparage it, but he wants us to relate to other people as well. That fits very nicely, Judy, I think.
Yeah. So that we're really truly doing both things. I loved throughout the chapter, he was saying statements like revolutionary love is, revolutionary love does, right? And he did those, he probably made 10 statements or so that way throughout the chapter. And he finished it with a really big one. And I love this last statement. This was towards the end. He said, revolutionary love encourages people to develop a compassionate attitude as well as an intense desire to end mutual suffering by changing the economic, political, and cultural realities that make it so hard for people to most fully embody the loving energies they wish to actualize in the world. Not just my loving energies, but yours as well. And it's, do I care enough about all of that to truly do the work? Do I care about Jenny becoming more loving as much as I'm trying to make myself more loving? Do I care about what's standing in her way, what's making it difficult for her? Do I care enough to listen to what may sound like her bitching in order to hear her soul, right? And Jenny's an easy one to pick on that way because she's pretty easy to love. It's those other people. Right?
It's because I'm smaller than you are, Jim.
Maybe. But his goal, you might have known, he said, is to make caring society. And we are not that right now, are we?
I do think that the upside of all this horror is it is like a huge wake up call.
Yeah.
Has been for me. I mean, people were talking about getting more educated, reading the Constitution, all of this. It's like, I really was naive. I did not realize that there were so many unhappy people in our country, and this is how they've acted out. And I mean, in a way, it's a gift because it is an opportunity to say, okay, where do we go from here?
Right.
And learn more, educate ourselves about.
And it's important to know that we don't have to agree with each other to care about each other. I don't have to agree with everything that's important to you, and you don't have to agree with everything that's important to me or with whatever I think is wrong for us to care about each other. But that caring will help us to be in those disagreements differently.
Judy, I have to say, I admire your story about the dog park, that you just decided we're not going to do politics here. We all love our dogs and we're together with the dogs. To me, that's like a wonderful example of the little baby tiny steps that we can take to create safety in our relationships. He's going to feel safer with you knowing he can be there with his dog and all that. It's like, that's a teeny little step, but I thought that was really inspirational. It was beautiful.
Yeah. And maybe that opens him up to another space that's maybe slightly less safe, but because this was a safe space, he can move to that space as well. And we've drawn our boundaries of safety very deeply away from each other, haven't we?
It really, really goes back to some of these themes that we keep having with ourselves and one another. And I'm thinking very much about the word fear, about when I'm afraid, when I'm in fear of somebody or something, and how that shuts me down or cuts me off, or how that separates me then.
Mm-hmm. And it's getting past their fears as well as my own.
Exactly.
Right.
Because it's a duality.
That's right. One of the hardest things about talking with Bob or with my friend Dean that I've told you about is that they automatically know I'm the guy who's not of their politic. And so they have knives raised already. And I have to choose to wade into those knives, and they have to figure out how to put those knives down.
Maybe we need to wear peace caps or something that denotes that we are not in that space, and something that's kind of a symbol of I'm not coming with that MAGA map hat on or whatever label. I'm just coming as I am, as is.
Yeah, in the book of Revelation, there's a concept that's been often misused, and it's called the mark of the beast. And some people have decided that the vaccine is the mark of the beast in some ways. I think MAGA hat seems like a mark of the beast. Here's what I like about your comment, Catherine, is it's essentially saying, what is it, how is it that I have marked you in such a way that now I don't have to listen to you, that I don't have to consider you, that now I can write you off and be out of relationship with you, and you to me as well. And there's lots of ways we've done that. And how have I turned you into the epitome of evil, or you turn me into the epitome of evil, so no longer do I have to be in loving community with you. And I think the rabbi is trying to teach us that revolutionary love says there's not that mark, or we have to ignore the possible marks we could put so that we can choose to be in that relationship with each other. Revolutionary love is never going to be simple.
Just not.
It is us choosing to step way beyond the easy, way beyond the most natural instincts we have, right? Because sometimes that other person will feel like the predator to our prey. And we're going to have to figure out how to instead be the prayer to their person and be in relationship to each other. We have to turn that prey into prayer somehow.
I haven't heard from Harvey in a while. Harvey, do you have any pearls for us?
Just this, that it's 4 o'clock and I am feeling the pressure to get on to another place where I have to be. What's our next reading assignment going to be?
We're going to do a chapter each week. I will send the, I will send the chapter out. I forgot to digitalize it, so I'll go do that as soon as we're finished here, and I'll get it to you within the next couple of hours.
So are we on the, I don't need that, but are we on the 2nd chapter next week?
Yeah, chapter 2 next week.
Okay, very good. I think that will bring us back to some of the issues here, because I think the big problem we're having is a problem of values, and that we don't share common values. And that's what the rabbi is asking us to examine and to make a turn on.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think it's sad that the church hasn't played a larger role in that. Yeah. But I think that we do need to make that change. So that's the wisdom I have.
Good.
Yay,
Thank you.
Harvey.
All right, you guys, thank you for your time today. I know you were hoping we solved everything, but we'll need a couple more chapters.
A little love.
Yeah, a little love. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Bye now.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.